You are looking at the preview box copy of Coalitions from Phalanx Games. Obviously from the iconic Napoleon figure and his hat. This is a Napoleonic game, but what this is the two main belligerents, France and Britain, trying to make coalitions with the other minor countries and doing it non-historically. Historically, you can do whatever you want. So a lot of player interaction, a lot of lying to each other at the table, and a lot of deal making. Let me show you the board. All right, we're looking at the board and the pieces. Again, this is a preview copy. Anything here could be changed. Consider nothing final. The board art seems like it's fairly well polished. The colors may pop, when they finally do the final ink work and everything. And the figures, these little guys on the cards, they seem very nicely done, and I would bet they're final. Now, for starters, the setup that is displayed here is considered one of the setup scenarios. I haven't seen any other ones. They say there will be more. There are some numbers on the map. Let me just zoom in on Paris, since it's also a key victory location. So you can see the numbers for the different territories. Those will also be the basis if you control them, and other areas that you spread into. Those will be your income, which is how you will get more units. These are units, and those can move around with your army. You can only have 3 of those discs with you as you move around, and they have kind of a cool function. As you move from zone to zone, you can either drop off an army unit and it turns into a garrison. And then if I were to move into this area, I could even then create yet a second garrison all on one movement. Garrisons do exactly what they sound like they do. They are worth 3 strength, just like a unit is, but they're in your color, and they give you influence in a territory where your army is no longer sitting. A lot of emphasis, sitting. Why would I say it that way? So the game will end in one of 2 ways. The first one is you can kind of see this snaking circles with numbers in them. These are your influence points. And if one of the countries, these are your influence tokens, can push that all the way up to 40, that will signal the end of the game. Now you can still finish some battles, so there's some little things that can bump somebody up, knock somebody down. Even after they've hit 40, you'll resolve those. But then the second way the game can end is if a non-French army occupies Paris. After the game ends and whatever battles are resolved or completed, whatever nation is highest on that influence track will win. Everybody's striving to be the highest influencer. This leads to a lot of backstabbing that is going on even within coalitions. So just the coalition winning doesn't ultimately mean victory. Matter of fact, you could be tricky and throw something to bring somebody down. So the game can play up to 6 people. With 6 people, you would have 1 person playing each of the nations: Britain, Austria, Russia, France, Prussia, and the Ottomans. But you can play in a 5-player game, 4-player game, and 3-player game. Difference being that, for instance, in a 3-player game, the rules specify that one of the players is going to be controlling the British, Russian, and Austrian nations. Only one player is controlling France. They're very powerful. And then the 3rd player would have Prussia and the Ottomans. I've only done solo playthroughs. From my perspective, these type of games, it's nice when you have that full complement sitting at the table, because the backstabbery, yes, the backstabbery is in full flare. So the first thing we're going to explain is the coalition section of this board that we're in. You'll see real quick, you've got a lion head, red upper left, blue eagle. Right below that is this orange area, which is neutral. And then you have the cannon, which is for a nation that is in a war of expansion. The different nations are going to pledge into these areas to show what coalition they're in. Now, the beginning turn, there's 3 minutes of discussion, which negotiation can be made, and your political status or the coalition that you're in can only be changed at this step, and it has consequences, because if If you're neutral and you suddenly start fighting another country, you may lose some of your garrisons that you have on the board. Or vice versa, you have garrisons, you've been very belligerent, you've got garrisons everywhere, and you suddenly go neutral. And there's some things that may end up losing you some garrisons. Also at this stage is where you might have a unit that's forced to go neutral. So let's say France was fighting Russia and they were able to garrison Moscow, which is their home city, their home territory. They would immediately have to return to neutral, and they would move down to the neutral area. And there's some things to entice you certain ways. So if I wanted to join a coalition with Britain, I would be able to use their shipping lanes with permission. Shipping lane would be like this little red dotted line. Where's my finger? Right here. So you can see a little dotted line down there. It would allow me to do that. I would immediately pick up 2 influence points. Again, that's how you win the game. So if I can join with Britain, I might want that just for the influence points. And Britain has some money they can throw around in the game as well, which would help me purchase more units. So there are reasons, there's this tug of war back and forth for why you might want to be with one coalition or another. I will go in and break down just a real simple battle in a moment. The standing figure represents one army, and then it has tokens underneath it, and each token is worth 3 units. And you can have a max of 3 tokens, so you could have an army with a strength, combat strength of 10, and then you can play cards that are your morale. And the cards you play will reduce your morale points. You'll also be doing different things in the game to pump your morale back up. So when you're playing the game, a turn will have 3 phases. You'll have a political phase, which is what I talked about with moving influence around up in the upper left-hand corner. You'll have a strategy phase, and I'll throw a photo in here on the side, which details out the order that the different nationalities will either have movement or mobilization. So movement is territory to territory. So I could move one army to an adjacent territory. Again, remember, I can drop off garrisons from the units that are underneath that army character as I go. And a mobilization is the making of money based on the areas that I control. So those numbers in the different territories. And you can see the way they're stair-step down in this picture, that you've got Britain moving first, but then Prussia has a mobilization, but then France has a movement, and then Russia has a mobilization. And you can just see how it pops down. Whereas you have Britain several iterations down, finally getting their mobilization. So you have the asymmetry of how both movement and the money making is going to occur. And obviously the different nations or coalitions can jack with each other based on that pre-knowledge of the turn order. And then the final phase is the influence adjustment phase. Remember the influence markers, the influence track. Getting to 40 is one of the conditions that will end the game, and it's how you'll win the game. And it's in that phase that the contested areas, the areas that were fought over on that round or in that turn, you'll be rewarded those influence points from those territories. And as soon as you're done with that, you're right back at the top of working out your political phase again and whatever changes. So let's explain the movement phase, and we'll just use the British since they're the first ones to get in the order to get a movement, but it's much different from anything I'm used to. So I'm the British. It's my movement phase, but what I have to do is enable somebody else. And what I have to do is pick another nation that is not even in a coalition with me. So I could pick a neutral nation. Again, if we're looking at this over here, that's why it's so key. I could pick Russia, who's neutral. Or I might pick the Ottomans even, who are down here and they're just, they're belligerents. They're out to expand and take territory. I could even pick the French. But when I pick, the reason I might want to do this is I gain morale by doing so. And I can possibly do it 3 times. So I have to do it at least once. I can pick France. France decides, you bet, we're going to take a move action, and they can move an army, and those discs, those units, those army units underneath it, they can move to an adjacent territory, setting up garrisons if they choose or whatnot. However, when they do that, I will pick up 2 morale points, which is those hearts that are over on the side, and that will be very influential when I fight. Even if France decided not to move for whatever reason, I've picked them, I would still gain those 2 hearts. Now, as the enabler nation, I can then decide on my own if I want to let France or offer France another chance for movement. And if they take it, I'll pick up 3 morale points. They would do, again, another movement. They can move any one of their armies. It doesn't have to be the same one. They can move it to an adjacent territory again. And then I would have the chance as the enabler to say, you know what, would you like a 3rd? This is the final time I could do this. And they could say no. And at which point I wouldn't get any more morale points. But they could say yes and move again, at which point I'm going to pick up 5 morale points. But again, you've got this sweet tug of war here, because if I want to pick up a bunch of morale points, I'm going to need to offer someone not in my coalition, enable them to make movements. And real quick, if I'm playing in a 3-person game where I'm controlling multiple different nations, I can't give that to myself. So after Britain moved in and attacked France, we'll total up their unit values. So France has a unit worth 3, their personal army worth 1. They were with Russia, who's an ally. They're of the same coalition, so they will get 3 plus their 1. And there's a French garrison in the area. So right there you have 11 points for the French coalition, and it will be tracked by these pawns down below, and I'll take a photo and kind of throw that in so you can see it. It's not in picture now. Then we would go to the British that have invaded in. They brought with them 3 different units worth 3 each, so 9 plus their army, 10. The Ottomans are neutral, so their numbers, they're not involved. Their numbers aren't even going to come in. However, there is this Austrian unit that is adjacent. Now, as long as they're not involved in another combat, they're not, they could pledge in a unit to assist as well, and they do so. So this would bring the Brits, or the British coalition, to 13. You then go to your card play. Now again, your cards that you have are going to be played secretly, and this is the morale points that are going to come in and adjust the combat points. So the unit that initiated the attack would play in their card first, secretly, and then it would go around to all the different nations that are involved, and they can each pledge in a card. So they could also pass and not put any cards in if they don't wish. Remember, these cards will subtract from the morale, whatever the point number is, and you're a little limited on your cards. So each unit would put in or pass, and it could go around where the Brits might be able to throw in a couple, or maybe the French are putting in several. At the point where all of the different nations involved have passed, they don't want to put in any more cards, you'll flip over the cards, you'll total them up, you'll add the morale to the combat. So after the battle, in this case, the British win. They'll get to take over Madrid. The losing units, the garrisons, they're wiped out. They're gone. These would be taken off the map. So the British who initiated the combat will pick up 2 influence points. Remember, that's on this track. That's how you end the game. That's how you win the game. And any supporting nations from their coalition, in this case the Austrians, they'll pick up 1. So that's just a quick sample. There's a few more details in there on combat, but you can see you're totaling up value. You can see the importance of the rest of the map that surrounds the territory that's being contested, and the use of the cards to combine both the strength of the morale and the military strength of the unit. All right, so there's coalitions. So you can see the structure of the game is definitely designed for heavy interaction between the players. You've got the diplomacy that's happening. You've got the deal making. You've got the backstabbing that's going on, the switching of coalitions, the moving of neutrals, the sliding over to you're kind of a rogue nation just out for yourself. When do you do any of those things? You've seen combat is quick. And I love the aspect of your unit strength versus that hidden morale strength that's there. And the fact that you can use a faction or a nation with great morale and up to 7 cards in their hand, they can use that fear of this wonderful esprit de corps as a billy club. Because do you really want to jump in and engage heavily with this person in battle if they're sitting on a big fistful of cards with a high morale value? They could just, come in and look fairly weak, but nail you with morale. Or that ability for them on the map, they don't need to have a bunch of forces under an army to still be powerful if they're carrying a lot of cards with a lot of high morale strength also visible on the board. So it's some nice, you've got a little bit of that fog of war, and then of course you've always got what these games bring with them, which is actually the deviousness of the people, the players at the table. Coalitions, Phalanx games. See you guys.